So, hello and welcome everyone to Cross-Pollinations. My name is Mick Jones. I'm a poet and I curate this series. And I'm joining today from Toronto, land that rightfully belongs to many Indigenous nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Wendat First Nations, and so many others. While we gather tonight to discuss and hear writing and reflect on health and care, it's critical we're also reflecting on settlers like myself's historic and ongoing destruction of Indigenous life and their healing and story practices. And rather than just acknowledge the land, I like to also spotlight different organizations that are counteracting this destruction. And I would love to offer a little look at the Indigenous Curatorial Collective tonight, which is a Toronto local nonprofit, and they are Indigenous run, led and aim to support Indigenous curators, artists, writers, academics, and professionals of various mediums. And they do this through various methods of gathering. And in addition to monetary donations, they also love to receive support in the form of books, exhibition catalogs, travel points, and volunteering. I've done some volunteering and donated a lot to this organization. I really encourage checking them out. So I'm just gonna drop a link to their website where you can donate to them in the chat. And now, again, welcome to Cross-Pollinations, a curatorial research platform that explores relationships between writing and health and care. And it is funded by the League of Canadian Poets, the Health Arts Research Centre, and the Canadian Association for Health Humanities. So tonight I am beyond thrilled to be joined by two of my favorite living writers, Lisa Robertson and Chelsea Rozansky, for readings and discussions around topographies of the body. And we're going to get a little more into the title a little later. So for a breakdown of tonight's run of show, we will have readings running in three parts. So Lisa's will be in two parts. She'll read from Riverwork first and last, and Chelsea will read in between. Readings will be followed by a discussion between the three of us. And this discussion period is also open to audience questions. So please drop those in the chat at any point throughout the reading tonight. It's really an honor to introduce these two readers. Chelsea Rozansky is a writer, artist, and critic born in Toronto and resurrected in London, England. Her recently completed experimental collection, Children of That Thing and Other Shorts, is about the perverse love triangle between art, addiction, and abuse, and we are very lucky to be hearing from this collection tonight. As C Magazine's writer in residence, she conducted an archival research project motivated by negative theology, questioning the labor rendered anonymous in artistic discourse. She is underway on a short film called The Speaking City. Lisa Robertson was born in Toronto, then spent 25 years on the West Coast, on Salt Spring Island and in Vancouver, where she participated in the collective life of artist-run culture, working with Kootenay School of Writing, Artspeak Gallery, and the Western Front, before moving to France in 2003. Her first book, XEclogue, I hope I'm saying that right, Lisa, came out in 1993. Her most recent book, the novel Riverwork, which we will be hearing from tonight, will be published in May of this year by Coach House Books. Two of her titles have been shortlisted for the Governor General's Award, Debbie and Epic, in 1998 and the Baudelaire Fractal in 2020. I'm really big fans of both of those books. Here's the Baudelaire Fractal, here's Debbie and Epic. And the rest of our guests' bios tonight are available on the event page, and I really encourage you to check those out. And I wanted to bring these two writers in particular together tonight for the ways in which their work transforms states of disillusionment into wells of possibility. We're talking disillusionment with literary canons and labor conditions, intergenerational subcultures, late night habits, boyfriends, and bad coughs. In the work you'll hear from tonight, disillusionment is transformed by reading, and a kind of reading that is cerebral, corporeal, metaphysical, and visceral. Reading Baudelaire or Lacan, sure, but also threads of Margiela garments and bodies. Bodies are read as archives. Chronic ailments or trauma, along with their attendant symptoms, are translated and researched. A cough becomes an artifact, each wound an expression, a window into that which has disappeared. Disappeared histories can here be glimpsed. What I thought was the past was in my body, states the protagonist of Lisa's Riverwork. In Chelsea's essay, she offers a description of trauma as how people live in each other. I thought that rhyme between their work was really something. For me, both Lisa and Chelsea are fundamentally heartthrob philosophers and oracles in the form of dandies. And with that, I'll invite Lisa Robertson to the stage.
Thank you, Mick. Thanks for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here with you and with Chelsea. I'm going to read for a little while from the second chapter of Riverwork. This novel's first-person narrator is named Lucy Frost, and Lucy Frost is a 63-year-old cleaning person who has insomnia. Each chapter begins with some fairly chunky epigraphs, and I will read those. The first is from Jean Starobinski's essay on Rousseau's illness. The malady clearly seems to be the somatic expression of a proud and anxious negation. Note, further, that nearly all of Rousseau's acute attacks come as he enters or is on the brink of entering into a situation of social dependency. At the beginning of his stay in Venice, when he must obey the orders of a capricious and tyrannical ambassador, when Monsieur de Franqueuil, the Collector General of Taxes, offers him a position as bookkeeper, and when he is to be presented to the king to receive a pension. Each time, Rousseau, who accepts no compromise, no subjugation, says no with his entire body. The disease is so much more than a pretext. It is a form of behavior. The need to urinate and the refusal to accept an intolerable situation of dependence are identical. Almost always with Rousseau, the body speaks first. And the second is from Gilles Deleuze's dialogues. In life, there is a sort of awkwardness, a delicacy of health, a frailty of constitution, a vital stammering, which is someone's charm. Charm is the source of life. Those who have no charm have no life. 2:17 a.m., false morning. My body on dark alert, vigilant in its exhaustion. One shutter has swung open in the wind. The sky shows through my window and the stars still shine bright as I wake. Are stars my masters? Is water? I lie awake irritably in the density of the night and contemplate the fate of my body. All causation is black comedy. My head aches, my bones click, and I forget the facts. I'm 63. Nights snagged on me, rumpled up like the striated surface of the earth. I lie and sweat in my coiled blankets, trying to locate myself among the roiling elements. Insomnia is work. When Louise Bourgeois suffered from insomnia in the winter of her 73rd year, she made a series of drawings to resuture the night. She would scrawl lists and annotations on the backs of these drawings, often mentioning the Bièvre River, where her family restored tapestries, dyeing the yarn in the tannic river water as had been done for centuries. The dyeing basins would spawn mosquitoes and tadpoles, she said. On Christmas 1994, she wrote on an insomnia drawing, "Wait for emerging emotions, hard to spot out. Wait and breathe right." Hannah Arendt says the interior of the body is not for appearing. The inner organs of all bodies are similar to the eye. Diversity is external. Our hidden organ life is the opposite of the social, which is necessarily seen. She says that the body's exterior parts and adornments express the meaning of perceiving, among others, admiring and admired, abhorred and scorned. All organs are the same. But what if the socius of those who, like guts and lesions in the humors, do not appear? We have not chosen non-appearing. We're constrained to it. What of the work that's invisible but not private? The community of insomniacs, the community of cleaners, the community of poets, the hag community. We survive clandestinely, beneath contemporaneity, inconspicuous. The principle of mortality speaks in our organs. We quietly maintain the world. Mortality has a library. Montaigne, mongrel stylist of movement who suffered from motion sickness, was dead at 59, kidneys. Baudelaire, who suffered everything and was seized by a stroke on the sill of a Baroque confessional repeating a curse, died at 46, syphilis likely. Rousseau died at 66 of causes finally unrelated to his lifelong urethral malformation. To his great consternation, he could not piss. Never in his life had issued a steady stream, and toward that wished-for outpouring, each day he probed the fleshy aperture with a slender metal instrument specially made for him for this purpose. Chateaubriand slowly fizzled until the age of 79, expiring after a final visit to his mistress, Madame Recamier, she mute and he blind, or was it vice versa? It was 1848, the year of the Third Revolution and its failure and Baudelaire's grand political disillusionment. The final version of Memoirs from Beyond the Tomb was posthumously published, transforming the title to a self-satisfied quip. Violette Leduc died of breast cancer in 1972 at the age of 65, after barely finishing her manuscript for La Chasse à l'Amour, the final volume of her autobiographical trilogy, having begun it in a chic clinic for melancholy that operated in the very house in the Bièvre River Valley where Chateaubriand had begun his own memoirs in 1809. Genet died in 1986 at 75 of throat cancer, a fall, or both, in a 13th arrondissement hotel room where one can still book a stay for 97 euros and accordingly pass the night with the few books the great thief cared to possess. Poussin died at 71 with palsy and an inflamed bowel, leaving his last canvas, Apollo in Love with the nymph Daphne, unfinished. Poe expired mysteriously of fever, perhaps battered by ruffians, or was it death by drinking? He was just 40 years old. At 63, my own urine flows unimpeded, indeed at times too easily. I still have all my organs save my tonsils. In my childhood, it was the medical style to remove tonsils. I have become interested in medical style. Diagnostics are interpretive art. Descriptions and pathologies change fashion. Should the patient suffer, submit, prevent, be sequestered, pray, detoxify, soak in a solution of mineral salts? My liver repeats, in spite of all the purgings and sweetenings, the coddlings and dreary abstinences, and my cough is as low and dry as an archivist's, inflamed by the dust of endless documents and volumes. With scrupulous fidelity, transforming these heroic durations into the swagger of my bodily decay. I've taken the great confessionalists into my lungs, which throb like a world. I fear I won't finish my work. It is night. I'm awake, aching. I feel for my pen.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that first half of your reading. I'll invite Chelsea now to the stage.
Hi. Um, Thank you, Lisa. I'm honored to follow you. Okay, I'm reading an essay called Old Tricks. I'm just reading for like 20 minutes straight, so buckle up. Okay. The boy we're in love with is up to his old tricks again. We, or rather so and so, will forgive him at first because of his eyes and his gestures and his charm. So and so loves a charismatic straight boy because he perceives it as a rare combination, said Tony on his balcony the other day about his friend who's gay and was loving this charismatic straight boy the night before. Well, who doesn't? I asked, unsure whether I stood by my own question, but thinking nonetheless of all the charismatic straight boys I've known, each of whom I've had or have a crush on. Well, yeah, they literally have everything, said Tony. But I digress. We're at the movies and we're in love with Brad Pitt because of this and that about him. The way he eats an apple or a sandwich with the casual nonchalance most people hope they're serving when they smoke a cigarette. In Trees Tropiques, Hilton All's gorgeous essay about unrequited love and movies and friendship and race relations in America, he writes, Sir or lady, as I shall call him, sits on the promontory of our village, deep in movie love. He's running the same old flick in his head again. Sitting in this theater next to a boy I have a crush on, I steal glimpses at him. He's lit up by the screen in front of him, his eyes flickering reflected images, and he's deep in love with the same picture that I am. So I turn back to the screen, happy for this shared fantasy or collective dream, as Walter Benjamin describes the movies. Granted, he's giving a critique of manipulation by fascism. But what is romance if not a shared fantasy? That's why movies make such a great first date. The boy I'm falling for looks like a movie star. He looks like he's American, people have said, which doesn't so much mean he looks like he belongs in America, more so than it means he belongs in the movies. When I think this, I wish I had a camera on me so I could capture his easy focus as he leans in towards the tattoo he's doing in the shop where he makes himself at home. And when I think this, that I wish I had a camera on me, I feel like such a bro and I'm embarrassed at the triteness of the sentiment. But I still wish someone else could get to see what I see and know that this portrait is mine because I've captured it. I always know I'm falling in love with someone when I start writing about them in my head. I think it's cruel and selfish of me to try to render another in my own words because I know I want to have them, to make them mine, and this is how I can, because no one else can ever belong to you, not really. But it's those things about someone else that you could never come up with yourself that are just so them and so not you that make you love them or at least want to write about them. Their total autonomy, I mean, the alterity of the other, you know. That it's miraculous to bear witness to something outside of your own consciousness, thank God. I get sad about this sometimes, the way I confuse loving with having, because I think loving should mean giving, but I only understand it as wanting to grab at another and wanting to make them part of me. Desire constitutes self-consciousness, for desire is an awareness of a lack in the self, to put it in ugly Hegelian language. Marx, in other words, says that private property leads us to make the mistake of substituting our senses with ownership, tasting as having, seeing as capturing, touching as holding, and so on. He's not talking about love per se, but rather alienation under capital, which makes true love impossible, since true love is free. Then again, no one ever gives Marx credit for his romance, but his economic writing is, of course, about saving our souls, since that is what capitalism is after. And a romantic reader will read this as analogous for love, as a romantic reads their love into everything. Not to confuse romance with love, I always do that. The abolishment of private property Marx proposes would liberate the senses. I like the idea of feeling more freely, and I'm saddened that the only love I must know is love under capitalism, a greedy love, a selfish love, a debasement. Anyway, now I feel nervous because as it occurs to me that I'm falling for this guy in this shop, which he doesn't own but inhabits like he's home, I realize the circumstances are tricky because he happens to be my roommate and isn't it unwise to fuck with home? That's a mistake I had to learn 3 times. This apartment was my first lease after a stint of homelessness, and though I was proud of it, I've never trusted a home. After 3 months of couch surfing and 6 months to 22 years of running away prior to that, I took a 3 month sublet, fucked 2 of my roommates, went on an ambiguous date with a third, left the fourth alone, and couldn't get out fast enough. And I was doing it again, or was about to. But that's what self-sabotage does. You fuck with something to kill it because you think it's the only way to set you free, and you ensure the familiar fall apart ending over taking a chance on the strange. And it's hard to know the difference between property and home. Not that I feel at home in this dump. When I'm lonely, I get petulant. I want to go home. Fuck Marx. Private property could be so sweet, but I've got nowhere to go. Earl Sweatshirt dropped Nowhere to Go a week and a half after I was kicked out, and I used to play it on repeat in my headphones, tapping. I found a new way to cope into the cement like an aphorism as I stomped around Toronto looking for a bar or a bed or the sun to rise. Every day, like a weird little neurotic ritual, I played it back to back with Fiona Apple's Largos, a desperate song about having a place to go. There's an early episode of The Twilight Zone called Walking Distance. In it, this big shot ad man tries to visit his hometown. Time has passed, but nothing's changed there. The first sign he's in the Twilight Zone is the freeze on economic inflation. And because everything's just like it was when he was a kid, there's no room for him in this world. Nobody recognizes him, not even his parents. And when he realizes the catch, that he can't go back home because there's no such thing, he rides away in a fancy car, and there goes Rod Serling's 2 cents cornbell narration about the one effort that all men try at some time in their lives, trying to go home again. Against my coolest intentions, I always get shivers and sometimes tears at this part. And I tear up too at the end of the Amy Mann song, It's Not, where she, the chanteuse par excellence, some swishy music criticism of Lauren Berlant's Cruel Optimism, makes that wishful singing pipe dream, where I get lost in space that goes on forever, and you make all the rest just an afterthought. And I believe it's you who can make it better and hear the gut punch, but it's not. There are other songs that spoke to me then from my soundtrack about being lost when I used to wander around the cold city with my backpack of dumb, gorgeous clothes, wanting and not wanting to sleep in certain beds with certain boys who were mine but weren't mine, and always looking for others who would welcome me in and whom I hoped wouldn't accuse me of taking advantage of their hospitality. When in the morning and they were in the washroom, I would tiptoe into the kitchen, steal handfuls of nuts and cereal, hurriedly swallow spoonfuls of peanut butter, pocket an apple or an orange or a slice of bread and some cigarettes, and put her back into the bedroom and fingered the loose cocaine and loose change on the bedside, or bigger bills, depending if I was greedy or if I hated them, and hoped they wouldn't notice or say anything if they did. And if they caught me with my mouth full and my hands red, I would bat my eyes and try to be adorable and outrageous and get away with it. And clothes, I stole clothes or borrowed them. I borrowed clean things and warm things. I took socks and underwear and hoodies and jackets and wore them all on top of each other under my lucky butterfly diamante studded jean jacket. And I suppose that is a crucial addendum to Boys and Clothes, which is a different essay in this collection. And it's amazing that I managed to make it look so swagged out. That winter, for the sake of fantasy and killing or buying time, I used to go into the types of boutiques that carried like zero stock, except for a glass orb, a vial of Comme des Garçons concrete on a cinder block, and like one deconstructed Margiela shirt hanging on fishing wire. And the shopkeep would approvingly ask me if my jacket was part of some exclusive opening ceremony collab, and I would grin and say, no, I just got it from some random guy. It's amazing what desperation and barely holding on survival looks like from the outside. You can't walk down the street without someone raving about your outfit or asking you out. It's because when you're flirting with death like that, you're finally skinny. Kidding. People can smell your desperation, and it's the most intoxicating scent to them. They say you find out who your friends are when you're down and out, but that's not true at all. When you're down, everyone fucking loves you and wants a piece of you and wants to commiserate with you and party with you and thinks you're the biggest fucking riot they've ever met. And everyone seems so eager to help you. And you have to accept every offer because if you don't, you'll be alone on a cold, dark night and or die. It's when you're up that you find out who hates you for being hot shit. They could only tolerate you when you didn't know it, and when you were using, they were using you. And it's never who you expected. There's a little Jewish folk tale called Something from Nothing, which would be a little Jewish folk tale, since Jews have always been among the class of people traumatized by capital, and they get it from all sides, that one. This little kid got this fabulous jacket, and in the picture book, it was sparkly and blue, just like my lucky butterfly jean jacket, the perfect boyfriend fit, as the shopkeep said on my 22nd birthday. I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw it, and he saw me stop, and he nodded, beckoning me in. Okay, fine, how much? I had asked, realizing that yes, indeed, it was in fact the perfect boyfriend fit. Just like a boyfriend, if only. And navy, like the midnight sky, with sparkly butterflies flitting all around it, like razzle-dazzle camouflage. Come on, it was made for me. $50, he waved a hand. I don't think so, I said, sadly shrugging it off. How much are you thinking? 30? Deal, my guardian angel. In the story, the kid wears the jacket to tatters, and everyone tells him it's obviously trash and he can't wear it anymore. But the rabbi believed in him, or was it the tailor, or his father? And either the rabbi or tailor or his dad helped him turn the jacket into a vest, then a tie, then a handkerchief, then a button. And every time all the villagers were like, come on, you can't make something out of nothing. But the little kid did, and he wore the sparkly schmata to death, and the mice that squatted under the floorboard turned the scraps into their clothes and shelter and drapery to decorate their little makeshift home with. I was living like the something from nothing kid in reverse that miserable winter, turning a sparkly jean jacket and a backpack of clothes into a walk-in closet's worth when I finally found an apartment. I took the smallest room with the biggest closet across the hall because it was cheap and I, as always, had my priorities. I balance a budget like Baudelaire. Marx learns the value of a dollar because of the coat he was always pawning, and people still undervalue fashion's role in the resistance. Other songs that spoke to me then. That lyric from Jim O'Rourke's weird ballad, Good Times. It would be so nice if you weren't here. Similarly, the Arthur Russell song, A Little Lost, is the part where he goes, now it's harder, I'm not on my turf. That spoke to me when the ground opened up under me. Or simply, in Mazzy Star's Roseblood, funny how things change. I like when people say funny when they mean to say sad. People and place are so closely associated in each sentiment. Falling out of love is likened to getting lost. I wish we didn't build homes out of one another, but if not back, where else can we go? Sometimes I think about the first boy I really loved and how he held my hand and walked me home and kissed me in my parents' backyard the first time. It was rare that I brought anyone to that house, so I thought it was special. And later that summer, when things soured, I thought back to that night that I thought was too good to be true. I would sit in the space we kissed and look at my hands where he held it as if looking for evidence. A couple years later, when things were so sour they were bitter and expired, but we were still drinking. His basement apartment in Kensington Market in the middle of everything. And his unlocked door and his arms that were open for me. Even if that morning or the night before we yelled at each other on top of our lungs on any sidewalk, only peripherally aware of making a scene because shame is merely an addendum to dignity which had been long gone. And I would go, okay, okay, I can't go back there. I can't go back there. I really can't go back there. And then I would have nowhere to go and I would go back there. Other beds, some really bad ones, some really bad guys, just around the corner. And for all my cultivated street smarts, I couldn't figure out how to get out of there. Afraid of being weird or impolite, I would just let myself be raped because why else would I be there? What else would I be doing there? And when I did figure out how to leave, taking a lot on my way out because they owed me now, I would go back there to that basement apartment and he'd just be awake in bed, listening to some old radio interview where Vincent Gallo is talking about how much he loves cat power, or sitting up in the middle of the night in some weird writing frenzy and telling me that I knew his door was always open, that I knew he'd always be there, and I could just come by any time and just curl up and cry, and after long enough laugh and play it on repeat. But sometimes it was fun. Sometimes we stalked the market at night and looked for cigarettes on pavement and food in garbage cans and made feasts out of expired meat and dared ourselves to eat it and waited to see if we would die. Sometimes we crashed parties and raided kitchens and stuffed as much food and drink as we could into mouths and backpacks and went apart and fucked strangers and came together again, jealously one-upping and daring the other, making midnight friends at midnight bars and flirting long enough for drinks and drugs and to see how far we could take it, flirting with death and skipping out on checks and running breathless into the nights till we made it home free. And we encouraged each other to write, which was the only gravity. Every happy memory is also a sad one because it's just that, a memory. When I remember things that were happy and now aren't because they're past, I feel betrayed by my own memory and abandoned by those who remember it differently. I always want to say, but you were there too. So anyway, my movie star could-be boyfriend wants to be famous and thinks he will be. I think he's dumb for wanting this, or at least for admitting it. Then again, what is fame if not American? I've written before that the desire to become a celebrity, to become an image, must be the same as the desire to be held. Fame can offer a kind of home insofar as being seen provides an illusion that one can be known, or in the sense that recognition, existing in the eyes of others, equals existing at all. This, of course, is an empty promise. So goes Berlant's cruel optimism. You're only taken care of so long as you agree to share in the proposed fantasy of the movies, to mistake romance for love. It's a false promise. Another Amy Mann lyric, you got what you want, but you can hardly stand it though. Sam McInnes wrote about this in an Art Forum article on John Waters. He discusses fame and Home's No Return and how Waters gets around walking distances catch because he never left home in the first place. Things change when you make it. That's McInnes talking. To cite the title of Thomas Wolfe's 1940 novel, You Can't Go Home Again, he writes, ugh, funny how things change. McInnes points out that Waters still lives in his hometown of Baltimore and suggests, but maybe you could go back, especially if you never really left in the first place, hell-bent as you were on vexing the neighbors. Okay, what's about to follow is going to be what sounds like a sentimental reading of Paul Thomas Anderson movie's Magnolia, but I just want to make it clear that I'm not interested in contributing to the hagiography that's being written about that guy, because believe me, I have thoughts, but it's in a different essay. So just know that this isn't praise. Okay. It's the song Wise Up that the Amy Mann lyric is from. And it's this song that everyone in Paul Thomas Anderson movies Magnolia sings along to after affecting one another and fucking everything up, and still they've all left each other alone. There's a line from that movie. The book says, we might be through with the past, but the past ain't through with us. I always figured this was a reference to the Faulkner line, the past is never dead, it's not even past. This maybe is a good description of trauma, of how people live in each other still under our skin. And it's true that you can't go home again, but still you can't seem to leave either. Man singing about patterns, about coping mechanisms, about not being able to shake that feeling, about those old tricks and none of them working. It's such a strange comfort how wise up is the closest thing to nurture these characters get. They're so helplessly alone, and instead of like a parent's lullaby, they have man gently cooing, give up. It is a comfort, though, to sing along, a consolation. You're alone, but you're not alone. Isn't it funny that everyone's singing in harmony, but stuck inside their own frames? They don't even know it. This is ironic framing right now. That's the thing, though, the joke of it all, that the one thing we're not alone in is our solitude. Everyone's singing the same thing. These lyrics I'm listing are different, but they're the same. They're about realizing it was just a fantasy. You thought you had found your place in another. You had thought you had found your way home. There's a reason everyone covers the same songs. Everyone covers Close to You, for instance. And there's a reason that in your solitude, you'll want to put on an old movie or the same old songs and you sing along. When Man sings elsewhere about things changing and some people selling out and remembering how it used to be, she sings about how they used to hang around and listen to Bacharach. But even when you're not covering Bacharach, you're still singing the same tune in different words. Courtney Love is saying the same thing as Karen Carpenter. When one sings just like me, they want to be close to you. And the other, yeah, they really want you, but I do too. In each, desire constitutes self-consciousness. The awareness of the self is shaped by desire for another and a recognition of the desires of others. Just like me, I do too. We're singing the same song, but we're stuck inside our own frames. We want the same things, yet recognizing our proximity to each other only makes us realize our separateness. In each of these lyrics, there's an invocation of nearness, but any connotation of nearness is also a connotation of distance. You want to get close to someone, but that's as far as you'll ever get. Close. It's the same with going home. You can't go back, but still you try to get somewhere close to it. I guess that's why walking distance does it for me. The ad man's nearness to home. He was so close. Ugh, that's such a rich kid thing, said that boy who held my hand when I told him that I wished I could go home. It's a bourgeois fantasy, he meant, the walking distance hitch, as if property could provide love. This was a drag to hear, seeing as my parents had just kicked me out, and all I had to be inside now were his arms, and he didn't know how lonely it felt. Or fuck him, yes, he did. He likes to stay out too. I know he knows what I'm on about. The thing about the traumatic event is that it explains a lot. It's a good origin story. But the truth is, I felt this way before I was shown the door. And you were there too, don't you remember? I mean, we've all tried it at some point, haven't we, to go home again? I've been told I overstay my welcome, that I don't respect other people's space, that I'm trespassing on your property. I've been told I act charming so that I can take advantage of other people's hospitality. What's the difference between being charming and being manipulative? I've been asked by the boy who held my hand. I don't know, but I didn't realize I'm not welcome here anymore. I'm afraid these accusations are true. I want so much more than I can admit. Desire constitutes self-consciousness, I know. I'm so self-conscious of my desire. I'm afraid I've overstayed my welcome here. I'm afraid I want more from people than they can give me. But why am I talking about love like it's property, give and take, an exchange of goods? I'm great with parents, by the way. I've learned from a young age how to sing for my supper. I look for a parent in every adult I meet, and I know how to score an invite to a family dinner. I look for a home in everyone. I believe there's a plea beneath every joke, every schmooze, and all those head-thrown, forearm-grabbing nights of love and laughter, to cite now a book title of Henry Miller's, unfortunately, a psychopathically charismatic straight guy, among other things. I like those nights so much. I like to stay out late, and I'll go home with those who let me. Am I not wearing my heart on my sleeve? I've asked my therapist once. I mean, am I not just begging people to take me in? No, he said, you're being charming. Well, I know I can be charming when I want to be. If you're charismatic, you can literally have everything. There I go again, confusing having with loving. But once I realize the catch, that I'm no longer on my turf, I need to get away. I was wrong about my movie star, it turns out. I really thought he was the one who could make it better, seeing as we were both looking for a home here. I knew it was unwise to fuck with home. You would think I'd know better. Cruel optimism, I guess. It's funny, some things don't change. The fact of the matter is, save for a few stints here and there, I've never left my hometown. I can walk to the house I grew up in from here. I've done it. It's close. 2.5 hours by foot in the middle of the night, but close. Instead, I kill time going to the movies. They're so beautiful, the collective dreams movie stars provide. where everyone's charming and everyone falls in love. It's the same old trick that romance is love, and we know it's a trick, but we'll fall for it anyway and pretend that what we're falling for is love. We'll forgive them, of course, because of their eyes and their gestures and their charm. There's always something playing, and if you stay, another one will play after that. Sometimes someone will join me. We'll laugh at the same jokes and we'll tear up on cue, and our eyes will shine with pictures of reflected fantasies. And we'll hold each other or maybe just touch, which can sometimes be close enough, and we'll fall into dreams and we won't go home. Okay, that's all, folks.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. I'm going to invite Lisa back to the stage.
For some months, upon turning 60, at the arrival of each slight bodily twinge or ache, I took the new sensation and with diagnostic precision translated it to a clear sign of my imminent death, performing this translation continuously, ache by ache, stitch by stitch, translating while riding the metro to go to clean the apartments, translating while reading, while walking in the street. Flaneuring errant said was the 19th century's secret style of walking and thinking. While ironing dampened linens, marketing, drinking coffee on a terrace, working in a library, so that always my inner speech conversed with an imagined death, drawing the exchange into a peripatetic dalliance. I now see that this comedy of betrayal was required of me as an initiation into the substance of my aunt's disappearance. My little pains are banal after all, to be expected at my age, the doctor suggests, having forgotten with his generation that medicine, like aging, is an art. One part of my mind preserved a tentative stability by recognizing the fictional quality of my interpretations, even as I performed them. I knew how to read. Perhaps this sensitive skill had traveled across material supports. I was relatively fit and harbored no known diseases. I had undertaken the punctual checkups, probings, lettings, and scans. I could rationally convince myself that the symptoms were random flickers and idiosyncratic flourishes of my body's necessary processes. I've always been on the side of ornament and artifice. Alongside this spurious rationality was my intense need to nurture the demise that seemed to me to be the logical and certain outcome of my symptoms. I coddled my imminent death like a perennially unfinished work. For months, my symptoms and the feeling of certainty that accompanied them would twist and knot themselves more and more tightly within my imagination, until the morning came when I woke up from an uncharacteristically replenishing sleep with the calm conviction that the death that I had been fastidiously composing within myself with my symptoms was not my own. Whose death, then? I lived nervously with this question as I had lived erotically with the embroidery of my death, walking with it, sleeping with it, dressing for it, facing it at the table, embellishing my descriptions as if to entertain and so hold at a slight distance my immaterial companion. I had carried and prepared a death I had constructed within myself by means of the ciphers of my bodily marks, temperatures, pulses, and sensations, and my blunt and literal readings of these tokens, as well as my increasingly baroque interpretations and annotations, believing I was coming into possession of my own discorporation by increments. As if mortal knowledge could ever be incremental. It arrives only as revelation. Now I'm convinced this opulent and demanding death that I had been building like a suite of sentences using the copious material of my symptoms and their sensations is not, after all, my own death. It is M's death, a fictive death, a death for my great aunt who went off leaving no death, no body, just a suspended question. Was there ever a story? No, no story. Or the core of the story is absent. A river disappeared. Also, women. Also, poetry. I'm transfixed by the history of their valuelessness. Disappearance repeats in a fabric. Nothing new. It's the iterative form that history takes. We'll always be made from the moot passage between absences, the slowings and sourings and knots, from the heaving up of strata in the wakeful night. Chateaubriand crossed to America, Genet crossed to Beirut and Jordan, Rousseau crossed to France, and Baudelaire crossed to poetry, then to Belgium after voyaging to the Indies or Cythera or somewhere. Louise Bourgeois crossed to New York. As for my great Aunt M, she crossed psychiatry, she crossed the family, she crossed to research, she just crossed over the opinionated men. She arrived at a river. My crossing, my conversion, the one I'm accounting for, is a transcription. She begins to speak in me, in the guise of piercing pains of brief duration in the ball of my right foot, by means of a thick phlegm heavily tugging at the bottom of my left lung, as a distressing and prolonged morning hacking, a flickering facial nerve high on my right temple. Upon waking, a slight transparent bubble moving horizontally through the field of vision of my right eye. A worrying, dull stiffening of my finger joints, especially those of my right index finger, which is my typing finger. A temporary but sudden and terrible leaden sensation of digestion. A flush of burning lava moving like a wave through my chest after the simplest lunch. A rude, bilious belching. A vague neural buzzing of several days' unbroken duration. A troubling sensitivity high in the jaw where a rotting molar was long ago extracted. A forked, cramping foreboding of the heart at 2 a.m. A crystalline fist throbbing at the core of one kidney. A periodic burning while pissing. Unattached to any stumbling, a splatter of mysterious bright purple bruising erupting on my right inner thigh. A sudden bum knee on the steep apartment stairs. Documents. I find them in my own body. In the aesthetics of symptoms, lost time abruptly blooms. As in an archive, the researcher can be infected by the spores of an ancient illness, long held captive amongst the decomposing papers, newly released by the dust of her riffling. By the time the symptoms and the sleeplessness arrived in their fullness, I'd been a serious reader for 40 years, 50 if I count my puzzled adolescent porings over of Flaubert and Poe. In this life, I've failed at most things except reading. It is only natural that I should bring reading to bear on the densely figured duration of my age. I read my nocturnal aches and twinges and my fears as deaths, small but inevitable, which they are. Each symptom is a demise. Now, my insomnia revealed that the death was not necessarily my own. Generations are discontinuous. In my own body and its proliferating discomforts, I read the death of my great aunt, who went off to Paris without leaving a word. She made herself unfindable. To describe her life, her absence, I would need to study the substance of my failures as well as my symptoms. I would need to align myself with whatever's now negative or pathless. As for the concept of women, our rhythmic, dogged maintenance work, what we repeatedly carry and drop, our bent backs, how subservience speaks in us, repeats in us, the feeling of various fibers on skin, the histories of these fibers, their manufacture and their many pigments, who washed them, who worked where, what that work does to our lungs and our joints. These histories are so visceral, so forbidden, as to have sunk back into the obscurity of earth. And then, what work does to water, how water becomes cities, what cities I dreamt, what I systematically misread, how I survived, what poverty does to thinking. These things must enter the register. What can I set down of the louche choreography of disappearance, the massive injustices in medicine, the inexperience of artifice? I like to make time for her beneath the phrases, beneath appearance, antinomian style. Bodies heal unevenly in the night, concurrent with their own atrophy. Bones and images knit as organs degrade. I flick on the lamp, reach for the notebook. Beginning from ignorance, like an ignorant man with only his frail word, but being bodily an old woman, also ignorant, also angry and relentless and ambitious, also grieving with my word and stunned by our frailness. I want to describe disappearance. The story here is that nothing happens. There's no resolution. Things disappear. People disappear. The earth changes. I wake up to write. I'm crumbling in tandem with the world. This is abundance.
Wow, Lisa, thank you so much for that reading. I'm totally transfixed by the sound of your voice. It was just so wonderful to hear that piece live. And now we're gonna pivot into a brief conversation between Lisa and Chelsea and myself. And if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat. What a reading, you two. That was so wonderful. And it was actually such a, it was, I loved the breakup of our set, how it opened with Lisa and Chelsea, then Chelsea and closed with Lisa. It gave a really beautiful rhythm and felt like it started a conversation between your work and itself. And I'm curious to start off by asking, in relation to the work you read tonight, or the process of writing that work, or your practice more widely, what tonight's title of Topographies of the Body evokes for you. And maybe, Chelsea, you could take this one first to give Lisa a moment of rest after that reading.
Mm, well, in relation to what I read tonight, um, well, I wrote a first draft of this essay while sitting on the toilet. It wasn't this long. It was like a couple paragraphs, and I think that it was similarly expelled from consciousness um, after I wrote it. Like it has a profane quality to me. I discovered it on my notes app a couple years after I first wrote it, and I was like shocked. And I've wanted to kill this essay so many times over the years. Um, I mean, shit and death are closely associated. Uh, yeah, I just wanted to kill it. And I couldn't. So I mean, that's part of why I read it tonight, to like kind of change my relationship to it. So I mean, in terms of mapping the body in that one, like that's a funny story, but yeah, I'm pretty neurotic. And the writing process is compulsive for me. I mean, Lisa, I know that your protagonist has insomnia. I wonder if you yourself are an insomniac, because there are certain texts of mine that compulsively scream at me at night, and writing them is the only relief that I get. Um, so. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a psychosomatic process. I mean, the things that I write live in my body. The things that live in my body are like curious irritations, that are sometimes agonizing. So the process of uncovering them often leads to storytelling because it leads you down narrative, which is like pathology. So yeah, I'll just say that.
I I'm not really an insomniac. I've had periods of insomnia from time to time, and sometimes those periods have gone on. But generally speaking, that hasn't been an ongoing um, frame for me. And I almost never write at night. I'm a morning writer, um, almost exclusively a morning writer, but then sometimes the morning can stretch into late afternoon. I mean, it can take that long to get going. I mean, I don't mean I'm writing continuously, but I mean, obviously, from what I read, my interest here in terms of corporal topography is in um, the mapping of dissolution and decay and failure. You know, the failures of the body, or what the narrator thinks might be the failures of the body, because any sign becomes a massive destabilization that leads to a whole chain of overinterpretation. Um, so I suppose I could say I'm interested in locating the vitality or the curiosity, as you say, Chelsea, within the experience of age and crumbling.
It really comes through in the book, but also the passage you read from. I particularly was so fascinated by in the first section when you go through, or the narrator goes through their various sources there, and kind of gives us a bibliography of a few writers and their different ailments that they encountered throughout their lives. And kind of that pairing of the archive and the body, I found really active in both of the pieces you two read from tonight. And I'm curious to hear more about what first kind of inspired you to be writing toward the body via the archive and archives via bodies. You know, it kind of operates very differently in each of your texts, but that kind of indexing and turning to references as well as the body in this different wanderings of your work.
Um, I think in my case, the archive that I'm referencing, um, it's not necessarily intentional. It kind of flares up as I write. Um, and I mean, I do think that is how art and literature is kind of carried through us or sort of integrated into us. It does kind of flare up. I mean, it's funny because in this text, I'm kind of talking about covers, but I think that the way I'm invoking lyrics is kind of similar to samples. And I was thinking about sampling because I was listening to Lil Wayne. And I was thinking about how in sampling, like a revolutionary spirit can be carried through history because when you're covering, you're like reproducing and, of course, bringing your own context. But there's something about sampling where you're like responding to, and through that responding to, you're talking back and you're conversing, and I think furthering discourse through that. So, I mean, when I'm kind of rhyming with like, the Earl Sweatshirt song Nowhere to Go, it's like, I was like having that experience of being like, oh my God, this is just like my life, but then like having that impulse to speak back also kind of reawakens the um maybe dormant spirit of prior works.
I love that, Chelsea.
In
Also,
this narrative I've constructed, that one of the characters actually is an archivist, and there are four characters basically, although there are more than that. Anyways, there are four main characters, and they're all researchers of different kinds. They're all one is one is a man who works as a private nurse during the day, but is also a doctoral student in queer studies at Paris 8 and is studying queer nightlife in fin de siècle Paris. And one is the referred to disappeared great aunt, who was herself a doctoral student in Paris in the 1920s and became interested in this river, the Bièvre River, which had recently been covered over due to festering pollution after centuries of misuse. Then there's the narrator, who is the great niece of this river researcher, who is sort of seeking the traces of her aunt and who has stolen perhaps or inherited perhaps her documents. So, and is trying to piece together this work again. So they're all, looking for something, and I suppose I use this figure of research, this figure of the archive, simply because of my pretty obsessional relationship to that form of work. The surprisingly sensual density that arises within interaction with documents, with texts, and this strange solitude that the researcher is in, but it's a solitude in company, in that sort of ritual space of the archive. It's all of my work is really referred to that in has referred to that seeking erotics in some way. But I could also say, Chelsea, in terms of what you were saying about lyrics and doing covers, and this kind of citational speaking in tongues is also a motivating energy for me in my compositional practice. I mean, I tend to sort of in this book, I've really sort of channeled the voice of Chateaubriand, who is one of the sort of background figures. And I spent 4 or 5 years writing this book, and during the 4 main years of writing, I also was reading the 4 volumes of his memoirs. So there's a sort of framing constraint. And so the entire time I was writing, I was reading Chateaubriand and couldn't really help but riff and parrot and be affected stylistically by the kind of pathology of voice.
I mean, I will say that because I read Riverwork and it's fantastic. And in terms of writing, the research process. I think as a reader, you feel so grateful because it's almost as if you've done the work for everyone, which I guess is, the work of an archivist or the work of a researcher. But it also, there are moments in the book that bring you to the immediate experience of what that research is like. And it's, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I think I'm just trying to say that that's a really like dense space. Like when you're reading and writing back and kind of it's very active, and I think that energy is evoked in the book.
It's something I love about both of your work, exactly what you were saying, Chelsea, about feeling grateful for the writer to have done this work and offer you these sources. And I feel in both your work, you're offering like these maps that if you follow them can lead you down so many amazing roads and open up total worlds.
Well, the
Um,
amount of tabs on my computer after I read Riverwork because of all those epigraphs, I was just like, holy shit, Walter Benjamin has an essay about that, you know?
it's amazing.
Well, there's the temptation to include everything, but I mean, behind the temptation to include everything is one of the major experiences of research is being stuck, I think, of actually the desire to include everything foundering or collapsing because the clear access that is fantasized as in the romantic love relationship
Mm,
is absent really, and you're stuck with a kind of dirty materiality, centuries old dust
mm.
entering your own system. So I think that for me is one of the reasons I wanted to try to represent research per se, because it's a recursive, complicated set of problematics that can never be ironed out, really.
Mm. I think the way in the novel you enact that with the archivist who the protagonist is cleaning for their cough and that literal dust and the ways you dive into dust and that just absolutely took my breath away. Uh, I'm just being mindful that we've gone a little bit over time and I just didn't want to interrupt this conversation because I think I could ask you both um, hours and hours of questions, but I would love to ask one more before we close, which is just to invite you both to share any reflections on the work or thoughts the other has shared tonight, or the prompt of reading about your work in relation to health. Any reflections that have come through that before we close?
Well, I could say something to you, Chelsea. I mean, when you were reading, I wrote down one of your sentences, which is, "I'm sad that the only love I will know is love under capitalism," and it made me ask, can there be health under capitalism?
Mhm. Oh, what an urgent question. I'm writing that down too.
Yeah, I mean, in my own research and writing, I've been thinking a lot about the ways in which most mental illnesses, there's a case to be made that they're all symptoms of capitalism.
Mm,
Yeah.
Um, schizophrenia especially, of course, but narcissism is, I think, kind of the exact inverse or flip side of that coin. Um, yeah.
mm. Well, um, any reflections you want to share on Lisa's work before we close, Chelsea?
Yeah, I guess when was hearing you read and reading this book, one of the things that kept coming up for me was the way in which poetry feels like this urgent and tragic project, or writing itself feels like this urgent and tragic project of trying to preserve something that is always fleeting, that is always dying, as we are all fleeting and dying. And I think some of your reflections about Paris in the book, I don't want to like diverge too much about what wasn't read tonight, but I guess it feels as if there's an effort that you're making to preserve a world that's dying, which is a world I think that artists can survive in. And it feels like a monument, and I wish that these monuments could be uh, physical shelters.
Hmm.
I um I was going to say I hate to be contentious, but I'm habitually contentious. So I'll just spit it out, which is that I actually have no intention to preserve anything, and that sort of conservation impulse is something that I would just try to expel totally. I am very interested in the idea of transmission, which I think is a different thing. You know, what happens between subjects um, across time within rooms. Um, I'm very, very interested in trying to achieve descriptions of what can be transmitted between people and what transmission might mean. That's that to me would be a kind of vitality within writing that I would aspire to make a space for.
I really feel that in the transmission energy. And so a note I had written down and hadn't read about both of your work when I was reading it before this event was that it arrives in reading with like with the energy of present tense speech. It really feels like its own interaction in itself, and to me that feels like a transmission of something at least. Well, it's been so wonderful to hear from both of you two tonight. I am so grateful for your time, and I'm so grateful to everyone who joined tonight to hear these readings and engage in conversation. It feels like a true gift of one of the gifts of the digital age to be able to sign on from all over the place and have these pockets of time together to stop and to listen and to reflect. And I am so happy to do that with both you and Lisa, Chelsea and Lisa, and everyone who's joined us. There will be a recording of this event from tonight that will go up on the League's YouTube channel. So it usually takes a week or so for that to happen, but there's plenty of thoughts I'm sure you'll want to return to from this session, and you can do that. So I wish you all a wonderful evening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And thank you so much for joining us at Cross-Pollinations.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us, Mick.
My absolute pleasure.
Great to be here.
Yay. Thank you, everyone. Bye.